like sharp blazers, cozy sweaters, cargo pants, jackets, and more. Find the latest trends and new arrivals at a Macy's Backstage store near you.
Is this the dagger?
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
I'm a bad man.
Another story is developing about racial discrimination in the NFL, and this time there are two NFL owners who might have shown their true feelings with comments to the media. Jim Trotter, a longtime and highly respected NFL reporter, is suing the NFL for racial discrimination and failure to respond to allegations of insensitive comments allegedly made by Buffalo Bills owner Terry Pegula and Dallas Cowboys owner Jerry Jones. In 2020, Pegula allegedly told a reporter, and I quote, "If black players don't like it here, they should go back to Africa and see how bad it is." Trotter was interviewing Jones in 2020 with another reporter when Jones allegedly told them, quote, "If blacks feel some kind of way, they should buy their own team and hire who they want to hire." Much more to come on this story. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580 is dedicated to empowering our communities by providing progressive talk radio for our audience. We strive to be an intersectional voice for the voiceless. As a Black-owned and operated station, we are committed to highlighting diverse perspectives and creating safe spaces for meaningful dialogue. We believe that everyone has something unique to bring to these political, economic, social, and cultural conversations, and we don't shy away from the hard conversations about current events. We endeavor to be a beacon of hope and understanding, while boldly challenging listeners to think more deeply about difficult topics that impact us all. With this in mind, our mission statement at KBLA Talk 1580 is simple: to create an inclusive platform that promotes civil discourse through honest dialogue and encourages personal growth among our listeners, so they can become the active agents of change. Our vision is to establish ourselves as the premier radio network with relevant programming across the beloved community, connecting people through shared experiences and collective power for lasting impact beyond these challenging times.
I'm Tavis Smiley. Delighted to have you tuned into our program today. We are in hour 2 after a spirited hour 1. In case you missed the first hour, please, at your leisure, check out the podcast of that conversation. We were talking in hour 1 about the disturbing and alarming data that black folk are leading this nation in amputations that are preventable, amputations that are costing lives, amputations that the medical community and the insurance community are looking the other way on, amputations that Congress isn't taking seriously. John D. Cochran once famously said that racism is a part of everything in our society. Indeed it is, but it's more acute in the medical community, the medical profession, and we are grateful to Dr. Faluso Fakaridi for the work that he is doing in that regard, and we thank him for that conversation in hour 1. In this hour, I am delighted to have a conversation with Dr. George Yancey, Until Our Lungs Give Out. Love that. Until Our Lungs Give Out. Conversations on race, justice, and the future. It's his latest text. He spoke with a stellar cast of intellectual heavyweights, including Noam Chomsky, Judith Butler, Robin D.G. Kelly, Peter McLaren, Cornel West, and others about what kind of commitment it would really take to dismantle the structures of inequality in America. Speaking of inequality in America, that first hour. Dr. Yancey joins us now to unpack what he discovered in those conversations. Dr. Yancey, good to hear your voice again, sir. How are you today?
Oh, same here. I'm doing well, thank you. I heard your previous guest wish you happy birthday, so I want to say happy birthday to you.
You were kind. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I see you're working still on your birthday.
Well, yeah, got work. The work's got to get done, man. Somebody's got to do it.
That's right.
Excellent. So here I am. Here I am.
Yeah.
So I first of all, I'm grateful for the conversation as always. Grateful for the text, Until Our Lungs Give Out. Love that title. As I said, Conversations on Race, Justice, and the Future. Before I jump straight away into the text, I love the concept. Tell me about the concept, how you came to it.
Well, what actually in that case, let me thank the nonprofit news organization Truth Out for its brilliant editing, and also Tikkun, where at least one of the pieces was previously published. So really, it was their openness to have me engage in these courageous conversations with these intellectual heavyweights, and it was such an honor to do that. But in bringing the text together, of course, the text itself, the sum of the text, is greater than individual parts of it, and I see it as primarily structured by conversation, and and also the title "Until Our Lungs Give Out." That very concept suggests a kind of indefatigability, a kind of steadfastness, right? You see, if you can visualize it, it's the image of going and going and going and fighting for justice and fighting against injustice and racism, et cetera, until one can't fight anymore. And what was important for me was the conversation. And the reason I stress that is because I see conversation as the very heart of genuine education, which I take to come from the Latin word educare, which means to lead out. And it seems to me if we think about the root meaning of conversations, I love etymologies, conversation literally means to turn together, to turn together. And it's that turning that may not be easy, but in this case, indicative of this text and embedded within this text, it isn't fueled by hatred or one-upmanship or zero-sum logics, right, or egocentricity. The text is not about navel-gazing, right? Is it agonistic? Yes, but not harm and absolute cancellation. So the text really exemplifies, I think, a sort of Socratic spirit, where the idea is to engage in a lankus or cross-examination, and where we emphasize, paideia. I mean, we're always referencing every time I'm here. I talk about Cornel West.
Sure.
Emphasizing paideia and the German term Bildung, both terms that stress cultivation. So, look, what I take the text to be engaging in and to be communicating is a radical rethinking of what dialogue looks like, which means talking across, right? So that's really, it's a pedagogical tool in that regard to reflect to people what genuine education looks like when dialogue is stressed.
You mentioned Socrates, and we are going to be Socratic in this hour. Socrates once said that the unexamined life is not worth living. The unexamined life is not worth living, and we're going to probe that in this hour. The book is called Until Our Lungs Give Out, Conversations on Race, Justice, and the Future. I want to pose this question first when we come forward, and that is why this is our particular burden. Of all the folk on the globe, why is it our burden to have to do this, to say what we see, to speak truth to power and to the powerless, on and on and on I could go if I had the time. But why is this our burden until our lungs give out? It's a serious calling. Our guest, Dr. George Yancey, you're listening to Tavis Smiley.
More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
Escalade IQ. This the intro to the all-electric Cadillac, perfected like Zoom. And on a full charge, you get 450 miles without the stop. Haiku. This is what I do. Daddy fat intellect since 92. Linked all the way back, panoramic roof. Coming 24-inch rim standard. Ooh, why? Shout it, don't kill him. Cadillac diamond in the back, cold chillin'. And when I'm on attack, on the track is no ceiling. Sky's the limit. You me? Straight drop, no parachutes. Lay lines like a longitude and latitude. Feel it, beloved, clearly we're hustling. Bussin', trucking. Cadillac.
For more on the Escalade IQ, visit Cadillac.com. Available late 2024. GM estimate 450-mile range on a full charge based on development testing and/or analytical projection. Consistent with SCHA 1634 revision 2017 MCT. Range subject to change prior to production. Annual rates may vary based on service factors, including ambience temperature, terrain, battery age, and condition loading, and how you use and maintain your vehicle.
You're listening to K-Drip, where we play all the best classic water-wasting hits like watering your lawn during the hottest time of the day and leaky faucets. They're tunes from another time because now that we face a hotter, drier future, every drop counts. Despite an extremely wet winter, keep using less water, fixing leaks, and reusing indoor water for your garden. Visit SaveOurWater.com for more ways to conserve. Up next, brushing your teeth with the water on. K-Drip.
For all of us, this generation and the next, there is simply no place in our lives for litter. And yet, it's everywhere we look. And unfortunately, it does belong to all of us. So, let's come together and create a litter-free, clean California, once and for all. Remember to properly dispose of your trash and recycling. Secure truckloads with tarps to keep debris from flying out. Clean out your car when you're at a gas station. Take pride in your community by organizing a cleanup event. Or join a cleanup event near you. Zero litter is the goal. Join us at cleanca.com. That's cleanca.com. Let's do it. Together. Brought to you by Caltrans. cleanca.com.
Tavis, this is Connie. Listen, we're all celebrating so much more than just your birthday, although we're very glad it's your birthday. Happy birthday, my friend. What we're really celebrating is that your voice is in the world and you are moving in the world and helping us get through this phase of our history. You're a gift, and we're all so happy to celebrate your birthday, my friend. Many happy returns, and you are so lucky. I'm not going to sing. Happy birthday.
Let's get back to more of this rich dialogue with Tavis Smiley.
Indeed, our guest of this hour is Dr. George Yancey. His latest text is called Until Our Lungs Give Out, Conversations on Race, Justice, and the Future. Delighted to have him back on this program. So, Dr. Yancey, you heard me say a moment ago that I wrestled with this question any number of times and days in my life. And you mentioned our mutual friend, Cornel West. He and I have had many, many dialogues about the burden that black people, the burden that we bear uniquely, not just in this country, but indeed in the diaspora. Why is it, before I get again into the text, why is it you think, how do you process that this is our particular burden to have to do this, that is to speak truth to power until our lungs give out?
Yeah. I think that, one, it's a fascinating question, and I think that it need not have been our burden, put it that way. Counterfactually, it's possible that we could have been in a world in which that wasn't our burden. But the fact of the matter is we live in an anti-black world, locally in the U.S. and around the world. So I argue that for black people, we are the global monsters, right? We are perceived as the global monsters through a global white imaginary. Our history dictates that we must carry the burden. We must carry the burden. So it's an ethical responsibility. We have to recall that if there were others, black folk, and I'm just going to talk about black folk at the moment, who didn't carry that burden, then our situation would be fundamentally different. So my sense is that, though I want to make a distinction, even though we carry the burden, what I don't want to commit to is that we are the saviors, in this case, of white people. Since we face white supremacy and anti-black racism throughout the world, we can't be the saviors. And by that I mean soteriologically. In other words, how is it that we can be saviors of people while at the same time we're called the N-word, while at the same time we're degraded, while at the same time we're humiliated, while at the same time we're dehumanized, and where we have our personhood deracinated because of anti-blackness. So I say to white people, look, I'm not going to be your savior figure. I don't want to carry that burden. But at the same time, my argument is that there's a responsibility that I have to black people, and to the extent that I have a responsibility to black people, that means by extension I have a responsibility to educate those folk who are participating in and sustaining white anti-black racism, in this case, white anti-black racism. And so I think that it's quite a burden, but it's a burden that we have to bear for existential reasons. I mean, we have to fight on behalf of ourselves because there will be no others who will fight for us, because they don't understand the sting and the profound angst and the profound existential ennui of what it means to be black. So there's an ethical responsibility and there is an existential responsibility. We want to live. We want to breathe. So in order for you to keep breathing, in order for me to keep breathing, I fight on behalf of you and folks that look like you. Right? That's our future.
What you just said now, though, raises a profound question for me, one that I'm not sure that I've ever asked in all the years of my doing this. Let me ask it of you, and why not, George Yancey? I hear your point about not wanting to bear the burden of being the savior for the good white folk. I understand that, and you and I are simpatico in that regard. And yet it begs the question, it seems to me, if not us, then who is to save the good white folk from themselves?
Let me make one more. That's good. Let me make one more point. I fear sometimes that the burden that we carry is like Sisyphus. For those who know the myth, right? He rolled the boulder and it came right back down. That was his damnation, right? And I often fear that this load that we carry, this burden, is Sisyphean. And if that's true, then it seems to me that at the end of the day, it's all pessimistic anyway, right? It's a kind of nihilism that is striking and that is deeply saddening. But the hope is that, and hope for black people, we face the abyss and we keep going, right? But I think that what needs to happen is that we need to get those white folk, think about it as a triage system. We need to get those white folk who are capable of engaging precisely what the white interlocutors do in this text, who are capable of engaging in parrhesia, who are capable of helping to carry the burden of our pain, but also helping to carry the burden of what is really white pain. And by that, I would argue it's the pain that Baldwin spoke about. It's their refusal to remove those masks that they fear they cannot live without, right? And my sense is that if we are to carry the burden of the death of a George Floyd, or the death of the recent killing of the 3 black souls, precious souls in Jacksonville, then white people have to carry the burden of the killers in that case. So it seems to me that if they can't not carry the burden, they also need a burden. What is that burden? It's the burden of anti-black racism that they themselves, in their mundane states, I'm talking about now non-spectacular forms of violence. I'm talking about forms of violence that we experience when we go to predominantly monochromatic spaces and we're the only blacks in that space, and how that's an alienating experience. I'm talking about even those white people who engage in creating critical theory that challenges, let's say, proto forms of proto-fascism in the United States. But even those critical individuals don't often give the kind of attention I think that's necessary to deal with anti-blackness through their whiteness.
Well, this is getting good. And I ain't even got into the text yet, not straight away. I'm working my way there. Glad we got the hour. I keep following you as I always do, so let me follow you again. I hear your point that the good white folk need to bear the burden of these white killers, and yet, as you know, that ain't how it works. I have never met, you mentioned today's my birthday, and it is, and in all the years of my living, I ain't met one white person yet who has ever felt, to my mind at least, the burden of the misbehavior of other white folk. But in reverse, you know exactly where I'm going here. In reverse, black people are always made to feel responsible. We feel burdened. I mean, let's be. I'm gonna ask everybody, just raise your hand if you know what I'm talking about. If you ever felt this way, you hear a story about something that went down, and you hoping and praying before you see it that it wasn't somebody black. Every one of us has had that feeling. We have it perennially. I don't know any white person that ever feels that way. They're watching something and say, I hope it wasn't nobody white. They do not feel that burden. They don't feel the burden of the killer in Jacksonville, in Buffalo, or any place else. So I hear your point suggesting that they ought to feel that burden. I don't know that they do or ever will, Dr. Yancey.
And a beautiful point. And I share your skepticism and perhaps even your pessimism regarding that. And I also agree, I don't know any whites who want to carry that burden. I think part of the reason why they have a tendency not to identify, let's say, something where a white person carries out some egregious act, where they say, well, I hope it wasn't a white person, is because white people have the privilege of seeing themselves as individuated, as seeing themselves as atoms, as real, genuine neoliberal subjects. I remember there was a talk that a scholar who does critical whiteness studies was giving in the presence of a white audience, and there was someone in the audience who said, a young woman who said, stop referring to me as white, refer to me as Jane, because that's my name. So, I mean, think about the audaciousness of that. Think about the way in which she was able to say, no, individualize my whiteness so that I can, you don't call me the white. Well, you see, that's a problematic mode of being. Whiteness allows white people to see themselves as persons, as humans, right? And the thing with regard to black people, the reality is, the reason why we say, I hope it wasn't, is precisely because we as a group have experienced racialized denigration. So racism, anti-black racism, is systemic, it's structural, and it affects an entire group. So it's not sort of an individual injustice. And I think that's partly the reason why we say, I hope it wasn't a black person. One, we've come to expect that it's a black person because it's negative, right? There's a way in which we want to say, not this time, but it's coming, right? And I think that what we need to do is really to get white people to rethink the ethics of whiteness, or to put it more accurately, to think about the immorality of whiteness as a system, so that then they can deconstruct their understanding of themselves as individuals and therefore begin to take responsibility for these acts that are committed not just by a lone wolf, right, but by the systems and the ideology and the practices, mundane, spectacular, state-sanctioned by whiteness itself. And in doing so, then perhaps we can collapse this notion, this myth of the white individual, and get them to think about themselves collectively.
You already hear his brilliance. Dr. George Yancey holds an endowed chair in the philosophy department at Emory University. He's the author, editor, or co-editor of over 20 books. His latest is called Until Our Lungs Give Out, Conversations on Race, Justice, and the Future. You're listening to him right now on Tavis Smiley. When you reach out to a pool of scholars, intellectual heavyweights, as vast as the group that you spoke to, black and white, Noam Chomsky, Judith Butler, Cornel West, Robin D.G. Kelley, Peter McClellan, and others, when you reach out to a group like that for a book about race, justice, and the future, before I get into three particular parts of the text that I want to give you a chance to unpack, before I get to that, when you reach out to a group like that, what are you expecting?
Oh, I'm expecting the very best. I'm expecting that these scholars, given their work, given the critical analyses that they give, the exegesis of texts, their understanding of the history of critical thought, I'm expecting that they will, in fact, engage these questions and are prepared to remove the masks of egocentrism and the mask of fear, right? That they themselves have taken these issues very seriously, and not just as academic subjects, right? Because that's a given, but existentially, I keep stressing that, the way in which, because philosophy has been professionalized, right? It's a part of academia. It's impossible to rid it of that, and yet the other side of philosophy is that lived experience of being able to engage in critical thought, where one is able to lay bare one's soul, right? And in doing so, one becomes vulnerable and vulnerable to the other. So the dialogue then that happens is a mutual shared vulnerability, and it's out of that vulnerability I think we get greater forms of truth, and also the desire to touch truth and to linger, as it were, in a kind of blues modality.
Speaking of our friend Cornel West, you raised him earlier. He is fond of saying, as you know, he and I had many dialogues about it. He poses this question, and not at all rhetorically: what can a blues nation learn from a blues people? What can a nation with the blues learn from a blues people? So I hear your point about a blues modality. Looking at my clock here, it'd be unfair to ask you the question that I want to ask you with 2 minutes to go. We'll continue when we come forward. But let me just tell you where I want to go and ask you a quick question that you can answer. When we come forward, I want to go straight away into the book, and there are 3 parts I want to give you a chance to unpack. One is this notion that you've already referenced in this conversation heretofore, this notion of global anti-blackness, not just anti-blackness in this country, which we know well, but global anti-blackness. Number one, I want to talk about whiteness as innocence and how, as you argue in the text, it must die. That notion must die. Then we're going to talk about matters of faith and religion. So a lot to get to when we come forward. Let me just ask you right quick, though, in the 90 seconds I have right now, speaking of Noam Chomsky and others, for those white folk who do get it, and I hope and pray that one ain't got to be a brilliant philosopher to get the humanity and dignity of black people, to celebrate and to revel in it. But for those white folk who do get it, why do they get it when others don't and can't?
I don't. Here's the thing. I'm not even sure if white folks get it. So, meaning, even the most, I'm going to put it this way, even the most brilliant white folk that I've spoken to, if we allow for that distinction, the weight of whiteness is often an issue that they sidestep. In fact, even the most brilliant ones will talk about white supremacy, the alt-right, proto-fascism, while at the same time missing the very ways in which they themselves grew. So we know what white supremacy is, but we don't understand what the normative status of whiteness is as itself a manifestation of supremacy. And I think that's what they often get. That is the burden that I'm looking for white people to take on. I suspect that when that happens, white people will be in a profound sense of crisis. And that's what it means. That's what it means to live to learn from a blues-soaked people.
You're killing me, Dr. Yancey. You're killing me.
Yeah.
You're killing me. I'm glad I got a half hour to go. I need these few minutes here to recover right quick from just that last sentence, just that last frame I need to recover from. His name is Dr. George Yancey. His text is called Until Our Lungs Give Out, Conversations on Race, Justice, and the Future. How honored are we to be listening to him right now on Tavis Smiley.
You're listening to Tavis Smiley. Ranked number 45 on the Heavy 100 list of the 100 most important radio talk show hosts in America.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. Benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. In California, the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors is agreeing to a $4.75 million settlement to resolve a civil rights lawsuit. A black man filed the lawsuit in June of 2021 claiming 6 LA County Sheriff's deputies severely beat him during a traffic stop in Inglewood in May of 2020. The man's attorney says her client was hit in the face as many as 44 times, leaving him unable to see out of one eye. The number of Lahaina wildfire victims identified to the public is up to 61. One more name was added to the list Tuesday. The 85-year-old man was a Lahaina resident. Maui police say 7 more people have been identified. There are 115 confirmed deaths. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Starting off in downtown LA, where we have an accident working on the 110 northbound right at the 10 Washington Boulevard. That is moved off to the right shoulder, but overall traffic is slow from Florence Avenue. In South LA, 110 south at Gage Avenue, a stalled vehicle partially blocking the off-ramp there. And in San Dimas, an overturned vehicle 210 east at San Dimas Avenue along the right shoulder.
What will you find at Macy's Backstage? Here's a hint. Fall finds for $25 and under, like sharp blazers, cozy sweaters, cargo pants, jackets, and more. Find the latest trends and new arrivals at a Macy's Backstage store near you.
Want to save on new blinds? Blindster.com offers custom blinds, shades, and shutters at prices less than big box retailers. Order 10 free samples of any product and we'll ship them to you for free. And right now, save 50% off any order during our Labor Day sale. Blindster.com.
Is this the tether?
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
I'm a bad man.
Another story is developing about racial discrimination in the NFL, and this time there are 2 NFL owners who might have shown their true feelings with comments to the media. Jim Trotter, a longtime and highly respected NFL reporter, is suing the NFL for racial discrimination and failure to respond to allegations of insensitive comments allegedly made by Buffalo Bills owner Terry Pegula and Dallas Cowboys owner Jerry Jones. In 2020, Pegula allegedly told a reporter, and I quote, "If black players don't like it here, they should go back to Africa and see how bad it is." Trotter was interviewing Jones in 2020 with another reporter when Jones allegedly told them, quote, "If blacks feel some kind of way, they should buy their own team and hire who they want to hire." Much more to come on this story. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. Let's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
Hey, this is Zoe Williams, the voice of reason from KBLA Talk 1580. Listen, if you're in the market for the best prices and the fastest delivery for custom-made roller shade, LA Custom Blinds is the place to be. Schedule a free estimate and they will come to your house, measure your windows, and bring a variety of fabrics to choose from. And then come back and install it all for free. The best part is that their factory is located right here in downtown Los Angeles, so they make the shades really fast. All you gotta do is go to lacustomblinds.com and schedule your free in-home estimate right now. Tell them Zoe Williams sent you.
The City of Los Angeles Emergency Renters Assistance Program will start accepting applications at 8 a.m. on September 19th. The program will provide up to 6 months of rent subsidy to low-income residential renters who are at risk of homelessness due to unpaid rent as a result of COVID-19 or other financial hardships. Learn more at housing.lacity.org. That's housing.lacity.org.
Dominique DePrima, KBLA Talk 1580. One of the most important details of running a business is managing cash flow. In fact, it's key to maintaining your company's health. Putting cash flow management before profits using dedicated software can help you drill down to the details that let you see the bigger picture. Having that clearer outlook makes for a stronger business. Whatever your business's financial goals, U.S. Bank Access Commitment Initiatives can help support you in reaching them. Access your financial goals at usbank.com/access. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Mr. Tavis Smiley, happy birthday, brother. It's Ruben Navarrete here. What an incredible journey you've been on all these years we've known each other. 30 years you and I have been together and a part of each other's lives. There's all those memorable times we spent together, where we traveled the road together, the times when we traveled the road separately. But I always love you, brother. Always been in your corner, always will be. Happy birthday.
Sounds different, huh? This is Tavis Smiley.
We continue our conversation now with Dr. George Yancey. In case, in case you've just tuned in, his new book, is called "Until Our Lungs Give Out: Conversations on Race, Justice, and the Future." He talked to a group full of heavyweights, intellectual giants for this text: Noam Chomsky, Judith Butler, Cornel West, Robin D.G. Kelly, Peter McLaren, and others, trying to get a sense of their views on race and justice and the future, and whether or not we're truly committed in this country, what in fact it would take, what kind of commitment it would take to dismantle the structures of inequality, or whether or not we're just paying lip service to this notion of equality and equity and justice and the like. And I'm pleased to have Dr. George Yancey as our guest in this hour. As I mentioned, I want to come straight away to three parts of the book that I want to give you a chance to sound off on. Let me start with the one you've already raised in our dialogue, and that's this notion of global anti-blackness. I think because this is nothing. I'm happy. I'm not happy about this, but as you well know, most black folk do not travel outside this country. It's not just black folk. Most Americans, overwhelmingly, most Americans don't have passports. So most of us never move beyond the borders of our country, and I think that's an indictment on America writ large, not just on black people. I make it my business, as do you and others, to travel outside the country as often as we can, because, as I said on this program yesterday, I guess, when you're on the float, you can't really see the parade. So one, you can't really see when you're on it, and for me, I can't really critique this country in the way that I want to critique it, or frankly appreciate it, if I don't get outside of it every now and then and look back on it. And so for a lot of people who are inside these borders, never get outside of it, all they know is the anti-blackness that exists inside this country. They're not really tapped in to the global anti-blackness that you raised in the text. So talk to me about that, if you will.
Absolutely. So, look, if we think about anti-blackness as signifying what it means not to be at home, then there's a way in which Du Bois was right, that there is this constant double consciousness that we feel, this tension. And to be at home, one should not feel that form of painful, agonizing double consciousness. And so my sense is that, after I spoke to those scholars, international scholars, from the UK, New Zealand, etc., the thing that I discovered, I had known, but rediscovered, I should say, and re-emphasized in the text, is that this place called home may not necessarily be just, not the United States, right? Mm-hmm. This homelessness as a form of anti-blackness is global. And what I understood after this is that, and it's a shame, it's something to agonize about, is that the global, black body, as I said earlier, and this is what emerges from the text in those particular conversations that I had, is a black monster. I mean, in Australia, for an example, the state killing of black Aboriginals who are unarmed, so you get the same thing here in the U.S. In New Zealand, you've got anti-black racism in the form of anti-black hair discrimination, right? Where black New Zealanders are made to feel that their hair is somehow problematic, right? It's ugly. It's something to deal with. It's a problem. In the UK, black women dealing with forms of anti-black discrimination in academia and the workplace. And all of that confirmed for me, I think, that not only is there anti-black racism, but there's also the global white imaginary. And what we find, for an example, is that in Finland, Afro-Finns are fighting around this issue of black hair. They had to create what was called a Good Hair Day, which is a celebration that women of color have come together to create and cultivate and re-educate black people about our hair, because of the white gaze has distorted that. In New Zealand, there was also this young girl who was like 12 years old. She was called the N-word. My question is, how did the N-word get to New Zealand?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And she was caricatured again about her hair. Or in Sweden, where they have a little cartoon called A Little Pink in the Motley Crew. and the black figure that's represented in that cartoon is a pickaninny figure. So black Swedes had to come against that, right? So this way in which the black body exudes a kind of monstrosity. It is the inferior body, the ersatz body, the hyper-criminal, the hyper-sexualized, which is not just amazingly located in the States. So then we have to think then globally. We have to think about the ways in which anti-black racism metastasized, let's say beginning with the emergence of modernity and expansion of Europe. Along with that, the expansion of these anti-black ideas and the ways in which whites have internalized them and continue to propagate them and sustain them.
That's global anti-blackness. The second theme I want to get to that you raise in this book with these other scholars is whiteness as innocence. And you argue in the book that whiteness as innocence must die. Unpack that for me.
Yeah, and I'm so happy that I'm delighted that each of the contributors to that section, the discussants, were okay with that heading. And yes, I think that it's powerful. And let me just give an example. Take the recent killings in Jacksonville, and the perpetuation of a lone wolf ideology. Right, that's a problem. If you think about DeSantis in his reference to this white murderer as a scumbag. And that we will not, as he put it, tolerate people who are being targeted based on race, right? Yet, despite that rhetoric, despite that discourse, he has targeted people based on race through the elimination of APA courses, African American APA courses, or signing bills to limit discussions on race, right? So what we recognize, I think, here is a kind of recognition that there are forms of protestation, there's forms of rhetoric that sound as if they are against anti-blackness. And then there are these mundane policies, I'm going to call them mundane because they don't seem like they're spectacular. They have a kind of a subtlety to them, but that they engage in a kind of obfuscatory gesture. So what I'm suggesting then is that we, in this section of the book, we have to get white people to undergo kenosis. We have to get them to undergo a form of emptying. And when we understand that, when we really take Baldwin seriously and recognize that it, in fact, is the innocence that commits the crime, we have to understand that on the hands of white people who deem themselves innocent is the blood of black people. Right, that's the point I've been arguing forever now, ad nauseum. And the reason that it's so radical is because it shifts the conversation from white supremacy, from these what can be then segregated out. For an example, when DeSantis says he's a scumbag, no, he's not a scumbag. Right, there's something that's happening. He's not a monster. If we're going to use the language of monstrosity, then we have to talk about white supremacy. We have to talk about whiteness. That category as an instantiation of monstrosity. It is the subtleness of that that's the problem. It's when I'm followed or you're followed in a store. That's the monstrosity. It's when we're surveilled, we're under surveillance, police surveillance. That's monstrosity. It's when you're pulled over because your driving is black, or when you're shopping as black, or when you're eating as black. In fact, when you are breathing as black, that's white monstrosity. And it's those microaggressions. It's, you're so articulate. It's, you're really a philosopher, right? These are the acts that we don't see as forms of white supremacy. I'm saying that all of those acts are ways in which whiteness functions as a site of supremacy.
And the argument is that whiteness as innocence must die. That argument is made in this text, Until Our Lungs Give Out, Conversations on Race, Justice, and the Future. I love his invocation of James Baldwin. Baldwin was a bad man. I often am asked, who would you like to have interviewed that you never got a chance to interview? Of course, Dr. King's on that list. You know how I feel about King, the greatest American this country's produced. That's my assessment. But at the top of that list is James Baldwin. I wouldn't have loved Nikki Giovanni, my dear friend, you've never seen it, you should Google it. And Nikki Giovanni and James Baldwin had an amazing conversation years ago, now 50-plus years ago, that still holds up to this day. If you have some time, Google Nikki Giovanni, James Baldwin, and just watch that conversation between the two of these brilliant scholars. But I love Dr. Yancey's reference to Baldwin, that it's the innocence that commits the crime. The innocence commits the crime. More with George Yancey when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
Seeking the truth, speaking the truth. This is the Tavis Smiley Show.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
The City of Los Angeles Emergency Renters Assistance Program will start accepting applications at 8 a.m. on September 19th. The program will provide up to 6 months of rent subsidy to low-income residential renters who are at risk of homelessness due to unpaid rent as a result of COVID-19 or other financial hardships. Learn more at housing.lacity.org. That's housing.lacity.org.
Hi, this is LA City Councilman Curran Price, inviting you to the 28th Annual Central Avenue Jazz Fest on September the 23rd from 11 to 7 p.m. For nearly 3 decades, the Central Avenue Jazz Festival has paid homage to the legendary Central Avenue and its influence on jazz history. Jazz, blues, and Latin jazz will be featured on 3 stages of music. Co-headlining are Hubert Laws with special guest Eloise Laws and the Billy Childs Quartet featuring Sean Jones. The day includes plenty of food, merchants, and 4 pavilions focused on youth programming, art, health and wellness, and public resources. Parking is limited, so Metro and rideshare are recommended. Hubert Laws with special guests Eloise Laws and the Billy Childs Quartet featuring Sean Jones. The day includes plenty of food, merchants, and 4 pavilions focused on youth programming, art, health and wellness, and public resources. For more information, visit CentralAveJazzFest.com. CentralAveJazzFest.com. See you on the 23rd.
Happy birthday, Tavis, from Ellie Mistal. Your show is the only one I tune to when I'm in LA because it's the only one that tells me what's really going on. Thank you so much for your work, man. Happy birthday.
Hey, y'all, this is Karen White, and I'm wishing Tavis Smiley a happy birthday. You are a star of no equal. Stay amazing.
Ready to re-examine your assumptions and expand your inventory of ideas? More of Tavis Smiley coming your way right now.
More of Dr. George Yancey coming your way right now. His book is on Until Our Lungs Give Out. Conversations on Race, Justice, and the Future. Brilliant philosopher out of Emory University. Delighted to have him on in this hour. We talked about global anti-blackness, that is. Whiteness as innocence must die. We discussed that. Now I want to talk about matters of faith and religion. We could do this for hours. We ain't got hours. We got minutes. But talk to me about matters of faith and religion, Dr. Yancey.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what was powerful about this section, and I'm thinking about it in terms of Lillian Smith, who wrote that brilliant text, Killers of the Dream, where she talks about growing up as a young white girl in the South. And she says, I'm paraphrasing, she says, by the time I learned that God is love, and that Jesus is love, and that I should, basically respect my brothers and sisters, I also learned that I was better than a Negro. Right? So there's this way in which she was learning about the sanctity of Christianity and what it meant to love Jesus while simultaneously holding the view that she is better than a Negro. And I think that speaks to that section of matters of faith and religion in the text, where really the interlocutors there were really trying to focus on talking about white Christian nationalism and to talk about the idolatry of that, what it means. And if you want a clear example of that idolatry, think about January 6th, right, where you had a juxtaposition of images of the white Jesus, the blue-eyed one with the really beautiful hair. You had, images of Donald Trump. I support, Donald Trump as my president, and like Jesus is my Lord. So that section is really to draw out and bring attention to the fundamental contradiction in the kind of Christianity that someone like Frederick Douglass would have critiqued, where he says, the slaver's Jesus is not my Jesus, right? This is a non-liberatory Jesus, right, and a non-liberatory reading of Christology. And I think in that section, what we do is really bring attention to that, and we pose the sort of question explicitly and implicitly, what do we make of a Christianity that is fueled by white supremacy? And while it's not new, it has this kind of palpability at the moment that is just so incredibly surprising, or perhaps not surprising, just evident, right? Yeah. And so that's what we're doing. We want to get white Christians to rethink the idolatry, the sheer ideologically driven white supremacist framework that they're using to worship God, which means then, as the early philosopher George Kelsey said, who also I believe taught King, that white Christianity is basically a form of polytheism, where there's a postulation of another God here, and who's that God? That God is whiteness.
Yeah, that's a damning indictment. But I take your point, or I take his point. When we come forward in our remaining moments with Dr. Yancey, I guess the exit question is whether or not we believe, not just in our lifetimes, in anybody's lifetime, this country specifically will ever get serious about dismantling the structures of inequality, or is all this just lip service to justice? George Yancey on Tavis Smiley.
Hope, agency, dignity. This is Tavis Smiley.
Can you dig it? Come on!
What's up, party people? It's your favorite MC's favorite rapper, MC Light here. And we're celebrating 50 years of hip-hop, authentically powered by Cadillac. And we're going to take it way back to where it started. It was only fitting that hip-hop began with teenagers at a back-to-school jam in the rec room of a South Bronx apartment complex by an 18-year-old brother. By the way, I'm also sure he had a Cadillac parked outside. He noticed the energy on the dance floor when he switched between two turntables, extending the beats, repeating the breaks, and never losing the rhythms. And that was the birth of hip-hop. And from that moment, it took off.
For more on how Cadillac is celebrating hip-hop's 50th, visit Cadillac.com/audacity.
Extended Family Outreach Ministry presents Praise Fest 2023, Worthy to be Praised Conference and Concert, September 23rd, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. at the Redondo Beach Performing Arts Center. Morning worship, keynote address, and conference featuring women in creative arts ministry and leadership sharing our stories, His glory, giving all praise, honor, thanksgiving, and glory to God. Don't miss the afternoon stand-up and sing praises concert with the Katinas, gospel singer Babby Mason, Three Daughters, and Kevin Click. That's Praise Fest 2023, Worthy to be Praised Conference and Concert, September 23rd, Redondo Beach Performing Arts Center. For more information and tickets, go to PraiseFest 2023 at Eventbrite.com. Plus, for the next 48 hours, use promo code KBLA48 to get your tickets free. You do not want to miss this day of praise. That's PraiseFest 2023 at Eventbrite.com.
Tavis Smiley, this is your brother Ren Troy Brown, calling to wish you the happiest of natal days. Tavis, when you were born into the world, you immediately became a value add to your family. And now, over the many years of your blessed life, you have become a tremendous value add to the larger world community. I love you to life. Very few adore you more than I. Happy birthday. All my love. Ren Troy Brown.
Who do you trust to get at the truth? Tavis Smiley. That's who. The conversation continues right now.
Well known for his influential essays and interviews at the New York Times philosophy column of The Stone and at the prominent political website Truth Out, George Yancey holds an endowed chair in the philosophy department at Emory University, author of 20 books. His most recent is called Until Our Lungs Give Out, Conversations on Race, Justice, and the Future. In the 3 minutes I have left, I want to do two things right quick, Dr. Yancey. Number one, your view on whether or not this country will ever get serious about dismantling the structures of inequality, or whether or not this is all just gaming, lip service to the notion of true justice.
I think that I'm going to have to say it's lip service, but it's a conditional lip service. Until white people in this country die to whiteness, and I just want to make it clear for those who are listening, I'm not saying that white people have to die, but what white people look like after the death of whiteness, we don't know that, right? So we need a new kind of humanity from white people, because at the moment, whiteness is the very opposite of what humanity ought to look like. I guess there's a tension in my thinking. Du Bois, when he left the U.S., that basically his message was, I set sail, I leave no date for return, but he says, but know that the American Negro cannot win. The American Negro cannot win. And then I think about MLK when he talks about the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends, right? And as I would say, I don't know if the universe is moral to begin with. King is of course predicating that on Christianity and the hope of an eschatological end, right, of where God will meet us. So I'm torn, but without that condition, as I said, without meeting that condition, I think that even if the arc of the universe bends, it will never end. In other words, we will never come to that end until that happens. I think my view is similar to Derek Bell's here, kind of race realism, where racist logics will be permanent, because any step forward is a step backward. And just think about the 13th Amendment, where there was the abolition of involuntary servitude, and yet the reinstitution of black codes, right? And it seems to me that's precisely what's happening, right? The moment we have, quote unquote, some kind of progress or some kind of movement forward, the logic of whiteness suggests that it will find a way to continue to live and to continue to then institute something else that goes under the name of anti-blackness.
There are a handful of things I would query and push Dr. King about, even though he's my hero, were he here. And one of them is that very quote. I agree. First of all, I'm not sure the universe is moral, number one. And secondly, I'm not sure it bends. It may have to be bent. It does not bend on its own. So I would interrogate Dr. King on that one quote, were he here. In your book, and I'm out of time, in your book you start out in the introduction talking about the value of having conversations, that we have to have conversations. We didn't have a conversation about that point of having conversations, but I thank you for this conversation, because I agree that we have to begin all of this having conversations, and I thank you for this conversation today on Tavis Smiley. We'll do it again, my friend, Dr. Yancey. Thank you for your time, sir. All the best on the book.
And I thank you as well, and happy birthday again.
Thank you, sir. The book is called Until Our Lungs Give Out, Conversations on Race, Justice, and the Future. And until my lungs give out, we'll be here for another hour of this program. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. In California, the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors is agreeable to